Okay, so when you see a U.S. Border Patrol vehicle, you probably think you're, well, near a border, right? But what if you saw one in Minneapolis? That's hundreds of miles from any international line. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into the surprising legal reality that puts the border right in the heart of America.
I mean, wow. A statement like that really gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It points to this huge tension in American law. This conflict between national security on one hand and constitutional liberty on the other. And it's all playing out in a place you would never expect.
And that really brings us to the central puzzle here. You see Border Patrol agents operating in Minneapolis, which is nearly 300 miles from any border. How is that even possible? I mean, the name itself, Border Patrol, implies they stick to the border. But Minneapolis is deep, deep in the country's interior. So what's the deal? Well, to understand how this can happen, we first have to talk about what most people, and maybe even you, get wrong. Okay, so our first section is about a surprising sight. And no, we're not talking about some dusty border town. We're talking about the border right in the American heartland. So let's get our bearings. Minneapolis is way outside what people think of as the border zone. We're talking a good 250, maybe 300 miles from the Canadian border. And this fact is super important because it seems to completely fly in the face of the one rule everyone's heard about when it comes to Border Patrol. And that, of course, brings us to the famous, or maybe infamous, 100-mile rule. So what is it really? You might think this is the obvious answer, but the truth is what this rule actually allows, and even more importantly, what it doesn't limit, is the real key to this entire story. All right, so here's the official definition. It's a zone that goes 100 air miles inland from any U.S. external boundary. Now, that includes land borders, sure, but here's the kicker. It also includes coastlines. Think about that for a second. This means it's not just a little strip along Canada and Mexico. When you include the coasts, well, the scale is absolutely staggering. 100 miles. That's the number. Seems simple enough, right? But what, or who, does that distance actually cover? Get this. Within that 100-mile zone live around 200 million people. Just let that sink in for a moment. This is not some empty, sparsely populated piece of land we're talking about. It's a huge area where a massive chunk of the U.S. population lives. Yeah, that's right. 2/3. 2 out of every 3 people in the entire country. We're talking major cities like New York, LA, Chicago. They all fall inside this, well, constitutionally unique zone. So where did this whole thing even come from? Well, it's not exactly new. The original power comes from the Immigration and Nationality Act. It gave officers authority to search vehicles within a reasonable distance of the border. But reasonable distance is kind of vague, right? So back in 1953, the Department of Justice decided to put a number on it, and that number was 100 air miles. Okay, so what special powers does this rule actually grant? Well, inside this zone, agents can do things like set up interior checkpoints. They can board buses and trains and question passengers about their immigration status, often without a warrant. They can even enter private land, though not your house, within 25 miles of the border. Now, this is what most people think of as the limit of their power. But, and this is the big but, it's not a limit at all. And that is the key to solving our Minneapolis puzzle. This brings us to the real source of their authority, which lies beyond the border zone. See, to find the answer, you have to look past that 100-mile rule. It's not the whole story. In fact, for cities deep in the interior, it's not even the most important part. Okay, this right here is the absolute key to understanding this entire issue. You have to think of Border Patrol's power in 2 distinct buckets. On one side, you have their special authority. That's the extra stuff they get inside the 100-mile zone. The checkpoints, the lower suspicion standards for patrols. But then you have their general authority. And this is the game changer. It's a fundamental nationwide power to enforce all federal immigration laws, help out other agencies, and make arrests literally anywhere in the U.S. So here's the crucial takeaway. The 100-mile rule is an enhancement, not a boundary. It's not a leash that keeps Border Patrol tied to the border. It's more like a special tool belt they get to wear in that zone. Their fundamental nationwide authority to operate is always there, no matter where they are. So, that legal reality explains how it's possible for them to be in Minneapolis, but it doesn't explain why they're there right now. This brings us to the surge to the interior, which really comes down to a major shift in policy. And it kind of unfolds like a domino effect. First, you get new executive directives that put a huge priority on mass deportations and interior enforcement. This, in turn, puts a ton of pressure on agencies like ICE, who suddenly need a lot more support. So, step 3, Border Patrol agents are pulled from their regular duties and reassigned to help out. And the final domino? That's when you see these large-scale enforcement operations kicking off in cities all over the country. And this is exactly what happened in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. This strategy led to a specific mission called Operation Metro Surge. So this wasn't just a few agents showing up randomly. It was a planned, named, and targeted large-scale federal operation. And when we say large-scale, we mean it. We are talking about more than 3,000 federal agents. And this wasn't just Border Patrol. It included agents from ICE and other agencies, all converging on one single metro area. An area, remember, that is hundreds of miles from any border. Now, as you can probably imagine, sending thousands of agents trained for the border into the middle of American cities, well, that sparked a national debate. A huge one, full of consequences and controversy. Yeah, the pushback has come from pretty much every direction. You've got state and local officials filing lawsuits, you have civil rights groups that are constantly debating the constitutionality of the powers used even within the 100-mile zone, and there are some really serious concerns being raised about using agents who are trained for the border in these complex urban environments. People are asking, do they have the right tactics, the right training for this kind of work? So, all of this really boils down to one fundamental question. When federal law says your authority is nationwide and policy decisions send border agents deep into the heartland, you have to ask yourself, where should the border actually end?